Atlantic Chase then by GMT Games, still continuing with this first scenario called Raiders of the North Atlantic, and we are the Raiders of the North Atlantic. The game has moved on a little bit. The Graf Spee, we got some bad weather finally, and the Graf Spee decided to try and get up to this, the marker, the rendezvous point here, and see what happened. And as they did that, the weather turned good, and again, and this British force of 3 heavy cruisers came charging from its station off Bergen to try and intercept them. Luckily, didn't manage to bring us to battle. However, the result of the rendezvous was that the Graf Spee had picked up severe mechanical faults and was now only able to conduct pass, completion, and trajectory, pass, and completion actions. So they can basically they can try and get back to port. That's the only thing the Graf Spee is allowed to do. Fantastic. There was a reason it never left Kiel, and that's because it was never in a fit state to. So now it's headed back for Kiel as quickly as it can. The positive from that, I suppose, is that those British ships are out the way, and we did pick up an intel marker as we tried to get out of this hex, but we lost it immediately with our pass action. And actually, we're medium, so we should have lost that one as well. Okay. And you can see also that the I can't remember whether it was on camera, but we sunk the convoy that was with this part of this task force, but that's now just a light cruiser sitting down here off the Azores, not doing anything. The current initiative is with the British, and the French have actually just motored into action again. This is the French task force here, this dangerous task force with the Strasbourg and the Dunkirk in it, and they have just plotted a new intercept with the Deutschland. And what we've got to do is, what have we got to do? I've just done the trajectory action with them. They're trying to bring us to battle, so they do a naval search on us. The trajectory length is quite long though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So they're at maximum trajectory length. Probably nothing happens here. They roll a 5. That's terrible. Actually, that's a miss. They don't actually achieve anything at all. They've got an intel marker on them though, which means the initiative immediately changes hands. That's fantastic. It's back over to us. Okay, well, since the initiative's with us, we might as well show a completion action, or an attempt at a completion action. The Graf Spee here, this trajectory here, is only allowed to pass trajectory or complete. It's now 6 segments long, so it's allowed to try and perform a completion action. So if we announce a completion action there, what happens is that the British player can attempt to seize the initiative. If they succeed, then our completion attempt fails, and instead we perform time lapse basically. So instead of get into port, we will just reduce our trajectory by 3 segments. And so, yeah, we would get something for our efforts, just not exactly what we want. But anyway, we're trying a completion. The British attempt to seize the initiative. They've got no bonuses on this, nothing on the tallies, so they roll a 10 and seize the initiative. Marvellous. Okay, well that was a good illustration of how this works. So we get to time lapse with the Graf Spee, but we don't manage to get ourselves into port. We're over onto British initiative. That was not ideal. Let's roll the British, see what they're going to do. They've rolled a 4. That is an X result, and that That's it. We've had X results before. One of the things up here, it says if 2 British convoys have successfully completed, fuel limits are now in effect, but they haven't. They haven't successfully completed with any convoys. 3 have been destroyed, but they haven't completed with any. So I'm assuming that doesn't take place. What the X result is going to mean is that their unidentified task force is going to try and act, and their unidentified task force is this one here, and it's crossing the path of the Deutschland, so they are going to immediately do a naval search. They are going to use the convoy to coordinate their naval search, and that's going to be worth a +2 in good weather. Actually, let's roll a weather dice. Oh, we've got bad weather. Okay, the weather's turned bad, so that coordination is now only worth a +1. But they have, so let's roll it out, the trajectories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. They're on the maximum again with a +1. And get an 8. Let's have a look. Naval search. 8. Okay, that means they can put a gap in our task force and then select which side of that gap we are. So they will remove that section of our trajectory, and then that annoying this. I don't know if there's a algorithm for this bit, but obviously they'll try and play as best they can. They probably don't want us getting up to that rendezvous marker, and they're narrowing our scope down to the area between their dangerous task forces. Okay, that was the X result, and what happens to the initiative after that? Well, they've done a naval search, so I think we attempt to seize initiative after a naval search. Yeah, that's correct. So German attempt to seize initiative, and we'll move on from here. So some British heavy cruisers pursued us, the Graf Spee, back across the Atlantic and into the North Sea, but we've just managed to the completion roll. They didn't manage to seize the initiative this time, and we have disappeared back into the port of Kiel. Fantastic. That's the Graf Spee out of play and out of danger. Now we have the Deutschland here surrounded by stuff. I would still like to get up to that rendezvous marker. We're in bad weather, so maybe this gives us an opportunity to do it. One thing I've not illustrated is that when you pass in bad weather, you roll a d6 for the number of segments you lose rather than those based on your speed. So I think we're going to plot our course back up out of here, round to that rendezvous marker, and try and rendezvous there, and then we're going to pass as an action and roll our d6 to see how many segments we lose. So, we've got a big fat 6. That's great, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That will plonk us down as a station in with that rendezvous marker, and that was as good as that could have gone. We've steamed away from all these dangerous ships that were surrounding us and searching for us, and generally causing us some sleepless nights. And yeah, good. So we're a station up there. That means that next time we get the initiative, we will get a last roll on the fueling table to see what happens. In the meantime, let's give the British a roll and see what they're going to do. They've got a 6, and that's a completion action for them. And they have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they have got a convoy that can complete. So we can attempt to seize the initiative on them. Let's see if we do. 8. No, we do not. So they have successfully completed with this convoy into Liverpool. And that's gone. That's a bit annoying. That is a bit annoying. Let's just make a note of it over here. I'm trying to keep a tally of things that have happened. So convoys complete. We got 1. So destroyed 3, lost the widow, and 1 has just completed. Okay, the British have still got the initiative because we didn't manage to seize it. And I think now, after successful completion action, it says initiative changes hands, so we automatically have the initiative. That's good. So let's make a weather roll. And it stays bad. Let's make a refueling roll and see what happens there. We've got a 5. I think that's a terrible result, a 5. D. We've had D, E and 2 Ds. D means that the Deutschland has also developed severe mechanical problems. Okay, marvellous. So we can only perform trajectory completion and pass actions. Isn't that delightful? Great. Okay. I think the scenario is drawing to a close. It's just a question of whether we can actually get the Deutschland safely back to port. Then, okay. Well, the initiative's with us, so we best plot a trajectory. So, and we best try and get a trajectory through here before we pick up intel markers by them turning into stations. So we've got to go round here to avoid air off the coast of Scotland. So then obviously dropping down like this. With bad weather we can now roll a d6 and see how many segments we can lose, and it's 3. So let's just do that. Initiative changes hands. British have the initiative. Let's hope that they're not going to do anything silly like try and sink us. They roll a 1. And they are going to do a French action to try and bring us to battle. Okay, that's great. Good luck with that. So the French are still attempting to hassle us. So they will plot a course as close to us as they can. And then they will do a naval search, obviously on the 16 plus. There's no coordination or air. We don't have an evasive, so they've rolled a 5 and a 5 on the naval search with 16 plus is a miss. They've got an intel marker on them and the initiative changes hands. Just see, I think they then perform time lapse and they're fast, so they would lose 4 segments like that. Okay, and it's us, and we're going to pass because there's nothing for us to do really. I suppose we have to do a weather roll, and it stays bad. So we are going to lose two more segments because we weren't close enough to do a completion action. Initiative goes back to the British, and they're going to roll an action to see what they do. And they are going to do a C completion action. That would see them create a new convoy, which I'm not sure I can be quite bothered to do, because it's immediately going to mean the initiative changes hands to us, and we're going to complete into Kiel unless they roll a 9+, which they don't. So a new British convoy appeared, but we didn't bother to put it down onto the map, and simply completed for the Deutschland instead. And the game is over because there are no there are fewer than 2 rendezvous markers and no German task forces left on the map, and that is the end of Raiders of the North Atlantic. What a roller coaster ride! That's absolutely fantastic. Just mind blowing what this is doing with some blocks with stripes on and some cylinders and some very, very clever tables and interactions on the actions you can take. I'm liking it very much so far. Very much. That was incredible. Yeah, really good fun. Really good fun. Let's have a look at the victory points instead of just sitting here waffling about how much fun I'm having. Let's have a look. Determine outcome. That's all a bit decisive, definite, isn't it? Okay. Destroyed British convoys. We got 2+. We got 3 actually, so that's 6 victory points. Each completed British convoy. There was 1 right at the end there. That cost us 2 victory points, so we're down to 4. Each German ship sunk. That loss of the Widder, that heap of junk, the Widder, should never have tried to make it out into the ocean. There again, the Graf and the Deutschland didn't exactly prove reliable in the end, but that puts us on -1. 1 or more German task forces completed in South America. No, we didn't get that result from the fueling table. All we got told to do was return to port because our engines had crapped out or something. So we ended up with a grand total of 6 for -1, and that gives us a what went wrong. No more German ships will be released for raids in the Atlantic. If a German pocket battleship was sunk, Raiders' days are numbered. Well, we were in the -5 at one point. If that damned completion hadn't happened right at the end there, I'd have had 1 point, which would have been an encouraging result. As it was, the German High Command were less than encouraged and have decided to scrap all this naval business as a bad loss, which is a pity because I'm enjoying this game and I'd really like to see what happens next. But that won't put me off from playing again. I might even play this scenario again. I mean, it's great. It is eminently replayable because there's so much variability in what actions the British take and in what order and what that leads to in terms of the game state, and then there's the variability in terms of what the refueling rendezvous markers throw at you. And of course there's just so much variability in the dice rolls and whether you get found and whether you get intel markers and whether the British throw heavy cruisers straight onto station and block the North Sea immediately or not, or whether you manage to slip out past them before they've done that, and so on. So much to think about here. Just before I pack up, then I'd like to talk through a couple of rules things that I wouldn't say were definitively wrong, but were perhaps a choice I was making that other people might not make. So the first is that I think these scenarios say in the scenario book that if you have an unescorted convoy that ends up on the battle map through an engage action with a warship, essentially. You don't have to fight the battle on the battle board. Instead, the convoy is automatically destroyed. I didn't do that. I actually fought out the battles. Of course, if once you start getting these convoys with light cruisers escorting them, then they're not unescorted and you would have to fight it out. But I didn't do that. I actually fought a couple out on the battle board, and thankfully got hits with the pocket battleships. So you're making your life slightly more difficult as the German player if you do choose to fight it out, because obviously you're introducing a component of doubt as to whether you're going to score any hits or whether the dice are going to be against you. And that would be more pronounced if you didn't get the Widder sunk, because the Widder is far less likely to score hits at extreme range. If we look at it down here, it's slow, it's got gunnery of 0 at close ranges and -1 at long and extreme ranges. So -1, 3 dice taking the worst 2 with a -1, +2 probably for a slow target, but with a +1 you're not certainly not guaranteed 9 pluses on that kind of dice roll, and the Widder might prove to be very ineffective where in this scenario if you chose to fight everything out on the battle board. But entirely optional, I think. And for my purposes, those very simple fights where the convoy was simply trying to break away and wasn't firing back, and so there weren't sort of tactical decisions to make. It was the simplest possible combat, which illustrated the use of the battle board quite nicely and the dice rolls and so on. So it served my purposes to switch them onto the battle board and film them, even though technically the scenario booklet says not to do that or not to bother with it. The other thing, I think I said at one point that there wasn't an AI or guidance on which type of air attacks to make where you have more than one. That was incorrect. There is. The book says somewhere that that it will make the AI will make air attacks against the target with the highest positive modifier. And as it happens, I cannot find where it says that again. Isn't that just typical? Anyway, I did find a paragraph that said if you've got multiple options for air attacks, the British will attempt to air attack where it has the best positive modifier. Now, I had a situation early on in the game where I had the Deutschland down here off Gibraltar being as a potential, and the Widder up here in the North Sea, and there was a very long trajectory for the Widder, and the Deutschland was a station, and I chose to attack the station even though it had the lower modifier, because it had a +1, but a short trajectory against it would have been probably a +4 up here, because there'd have been a coordinating task force and a closer airbase, but against probably a 9 or 10 length trajectory. So I would call that, in terms of effectiveness, a pretty even call. But the AI would suggest you take the +4, and I took the +1 against the more potent ship. I don't think that was a bad call at all, and as it turned out, an airstrike later sunk the Widder, and we put the Deutschland in some jeopardy, put that contact marker in it, and forced it away out of air range to go raiding somewhere else. I mean, it did return in the end, but the point is that from a British point of view, had you been playing, that would have been considered fairly effective, in that you'd have forced that raid to move on to seek different targets. But the point was that there is somewhere in here something that tells you to take the best possible modifier you can. Oh, here we go. I've found it now in the scenario book. British actions, airstrike. Select the target that will give the British the most favourable air support modifier. That's just the most favourable air support modifier, so that's just the one that's closest to the airbase, irrespective of coordination and other things. So that would have been the widder, but I chose the Deutschland, and I don't think that did any harm to the gameplay or my enjoyment or the outcome in any way, shape or form. I think you can slightly tweak some of these AI rules because you can see, or you can intuit, or you can just hazard a guess that one thing is looks just as effective to you as the other thing, and go for it and continue from there without doing any harm to the game state or the integrity of the experience. Right, that has been Atlantic Chase, or at least the first scenario. I think, what's the next one looking like? Contain and Destroy, another September 39. Weather is good, initiative is with the British, which is the player, and we have got the Rodney and Valiant battleships, and some reinforcements in Scapa Flow, and a load of French, and some convoys which we're trying to get in from Africa and Halifax to Clyde, Liverpool. That sounds familiar. And the Germans, what are they going to do? I don't know. I have no idea what the Germans are going to do. How do we even know what ships they're going to send out? I don't know. There's pages of stuff that I need to read. Let's have a look at this, and I'll do it next. There's no way I'm doing it blow by blow, but the thing is, I don't know how else you'd illustrate what's happening. The cat and mouse almost requires it, because each dice roll is producing profoundly different effects. If a naval search turns you into a station, or splits you in two, and one player or the other decides to which segments to keep, that each of the actions moves the game state forward in a significant way. That's one of the joys of this, I think, is that each time you roll the dice, you don't end up where you were. You can do with a miss, but even then you don't end up where you were, because you end up with an initiative change or a weather change or something. Things are constantly happening, and the pace of the game keeps you involved in it. I'm just going on about how much I like it, aren't I? Right, let's do this Contain and Destroy next. And I'll have to figure out a way to try and present a little bit of information about it without making 3 hours worth of videos.